Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, it's been largely predicted that the number of retail stores closing this year will be even greater than those during the recession of 2008. With brick and mortar retail facing its most depressive state in over a decade, it's never been more important for brands and local retailers to convert those digital browsers into in-store buyers. But it's not all doom and gloom, because I recently discovered a company called Netsertive, and they're revolutionizing how brands and local businesses work together to win local customers and get them back inside stores. After recently scooping up Mixpo 2, Netsertive is now offering a solution that addresses this click-to-brick issue. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to North Carolina so we can speak with Brendan Morrissey, the CEO of Netsertive, about those pain points that are facing retailers today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell me a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. My name is Brendan Morrissey. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Netsertive. We are a Raleigh, North Carolina-based company that has a marketing tech platform that helps large brands and enterprises drive their distributed marketing through hundreds or even thousands of local locations. So a pretty complex problem for a brand to solve, which is how do I take my marketing that needs to be harmonized across my entire retail network? Sometimes those are corporate-owned store locations. Sometimes those are franchise locations where I distribute my products. And sometimes those are independent retailers. And how do I make sure my brand-centric marketing is harmonized through all those channels and delivered in sort of an omnichannel way in the multitude of digital channels that exist today, and still adhering to those brand standards? And so that's really what we do. Additionally, we have a similar but slightly different part of the business, which is aimed at publishers, which helps digital publishers drive out rich media advertising capabilities across their owned and operated media as well.
Now, when I did a little research on you guys, I could see straight away that Netsertive has revolutionized how brands and local businesses work together to win those local customers. I mean, your company's two complementary solutions there that you just mentioned, MarketWise for brands and StreetWise for local businesses, actually enable cooperative marketing by giving brands the capability to activate scaled omnichannel marketing campaigns. But many people hearing about these solutions right now are going to be listening to them for the very first time. So can you expand on this a little, just to help listeners actually visualize what actual problems you're tackling?
Yeah, of course. I think, Neil, one of the best ways to really understand it is always just through an actual use case.
Yeah.
And so, like any story, there are many different characters in the story. Our story would begin with a brand, and let's make that brand Serta mattresses. So one of the largest worldwide mattress manufacturers. And so Serta goes to market through multiple retail channels. They go to market through their subsidiary channel, which owns a couple hundred retail locations, and then another 2,000 or 3,000 locations, which are independent retail. Now, another character in our story is going to be, local consumer. So when consumers make that decision every 6 to 8 years, as we do, to buy a new mattress, we start doing lots of research and consideration. It used to be that we did that by visiting a number of different stores, or perhaps consuming a bunch of printed information about what were the latest in mattresses and how do I go selecting a mattress and so on. Well, today we do almost all of that consideration and research through online means and consumption of digital media. And we do that over days, weeks, or even months. And so what we do is we help bridge all of that connectivity by helping the brand drive their messaging into all those local markets and across multiple digital channels, whether they be search marketing, display marketing, video increasingly, social channels, and other means, such that when that consumer is beginning or continuing his or her search for that product, they are being exposed to not only relevant information about the mattress category, but also the brands that make sense and where they could actually buy it that's nearest where they are. And so we're sort of bridge that entire gap from online discovery to offline sales opportunity.
It does seem that I'm increasingly hearing how there's a huge number of brick and mortar stores now that are closing, and some say retail is even facing its most depressive state in over a decade. And it's never been more important for brands and local retailers to convert digital browsers into store buyers. I mean, is that a trend that you're noticing too? And can you offer any insights around that?
Yeah, certainly. Well, there's no doubt there is a trend underway. And some would call it a version of retail Armageddon. I have a slightly different view on that, and there's no doubt there are stores closing. I think if you look at what gets the press, and when you see announcements of this many hundred stores are planned now to be closing, look very closely at what kinds of stores those are. And what you will typically find, I'm not going to name the stores, you can see them in the press, but what you will typically find is, it's not that there are bad businesses or bad products, but bad models. Mm-hmm. And you will find that typically these are sort of large department store kinds of concepts, or bigger box format kinds of stores that really have been overly retailed in two kinds of ways. One, they're retailing things that just in today's world, they're much more easily obtained through a digital transaction, right? Yeah. That's pretty straightforward. But two, they have too much retail space to make the business economics work for their business today in the same way that it might have worked 5, 10, or 20 years ago. And so that's the change that you see, and that's the press that you see. Such and such a big chain is going to be shuttering 400 stores. What you don't actually realize, although I did read a study not 2 weeks ago that said actually there are more stores being opened than that are closing.
That's a completely different narrative, isn't it?
That's right. So there's a nice contrarian view out there, but they're a different model. Yeah. And they tend to be a little more specialized. And so we have a concept that we often communicate with our clients, which is this notion of having a digital door. And unlike your physical door of the past, which was the only door a buyer would ever come through, your digital door now, which you can think of as the sum total of all of your points of presence in the digital world, your own website, directory listings online, your appearance in various types of digital advertising channels, all of these things together really make up your digital door. And if you as a business can't bring someone through your digital door first, they will almost never come through your physical door. So it's that thing that precedes a physical door, entry. And so, yes, I think there's the tides are really changing related to the retail landscape. I don't think it's an Armageddon. I think the strongest will survive. I think the strongest ones are already investing in their digital door. And what you're seeing is a separation of those that have invested in that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are a lot of challenges out there facing retail. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of opportunities as well, especially now we're all talking about the digital transformation of everything. I mean, but can you tell me more about Netsertive's recent acquisition of Mixpo, and also what Mixpo is and how it's going to help retailers to execute those automated omnichannel marketing campaigns across thousands of local locations?
Of course. So, this part of the story would go back a little over a year. We decided that as we saw the trends in how consumers were consuming media in their research and consideration, and how we were helping brands and enterprises reach those consumers, we realized that video and social are sort of two of the fastest growing media channels that were becoming more and more important in a purchase consideration cycle. And so we didn't have a whole lot of depth on the video side. And so we went out and looked around the space to find a company that might be able to help us execute that portion of what we needed to apply in order to help an enterprise scale their capabilities around deploying video. And so we came to know a company called Mixpo, which was based in Seattle. And we really loved what they were doing. We thought it was very different from all of the competitors doing that particular piece. And so we quickly developed a commercial agreement with them and did a partnership. And we started pulling in some of their capabilities to scale and localize video advertising components for large numbers of locations within a given brand network. And we did that for a couple of quarters. We got a lot of demand from our enterprise clients at the local level. The local locations were really loving it. It was a faster, more seamless way to deploy video, which has traditionally been really difficult, especially as related to the development of creative, which Mixpost platform addresses expertly. And so we decided, at that point, boy, we really should go deeper here. And that conversation turned into sort of full-blown dialogue around bringing the two companies together. And so we did that in August of this year, where we closed the transaction. So we are now one company. And that was sort of a nice little missing link for us, again, to deploy at scale and particular video and rich media capabilities for our brand networks and dynamically localize those ad units across hundreds or even thousands of locations.
Now, consumers also are browsing more on smartphones, generating over half of all traffic now. But when it comes to clicking the buy button, they still revert to the desktop browser, which I know I do. So I look at everything on my phone and then don't buy till I get on my laptop when I get in. I mean, but why do you think this is, and how do you address that mobile gap?
Sure. So, well, I think there's a couple things at play there. One is, and they may seem at odds, but they're actually together. One is, of course, people now consume more media from mobile devices than they do from desktop, as you know.
Yeah.
And so we spend more time on that mobile device, right? I mean, if there's one thing that you're always have with you now, it's your mobile device, which has become more important than your wallet. In fact, in many cases, it is your wallet now. And so if you think back just a small number of years, if you ask anybody what's one thing you can't live without, you can't leave the house without, you can't be without, you'll be lost without, it was your wallet.
Yeah. Right?
Now it's your smartphone. And because of that, it's so easy, no question goes unanswered. Nobody asks a little known fact question at a cocktail party anymore without somebody pulling out Wikipedia in about 3 seconds and answering the question, no matter how obscure. And so it's that instant access. You have it with you all the time. You can answer any question. You can find any location. You can look for any product. And so we do that very quickly. But the time span for a mobile device is much, much shorter, for example, than it might be on a larger screen where you're going to spend a little more time getting all the particulars. And so I might, for example, be interested in, I'm doing a little project, perhaps a remodeling project, and I need an appliance. So I'm looking for dishwashers. I might sort of, when I have a few spare moments, scan, using my mobile phone, some information about dishwashers. Hey, what's new in dishwashers? What about those neat, like, drawer-style pull-out dishwashers, as opposed to the full flip-down, full-size cabinet one? And I might do a little bit of discovery there and like, wow, this is pretty cool. But I'm probably not going to go all the way to the deep specifications and the measurements for my cabinet and where it's going to fit and the color choices and all that until, well, number one, I talk to my wife. And number two, I probably have a bigger screen because now I need to go select all those specifications. There's specific measurements. There's, little things you got to get through. And doing that on a very, very small screen just is a little more difficult. And so I think you see a lot of these, small vignette style searching, hunting, taking quick looks at products. But then ultimately, when I got to go through and do the transaction, I might have to put in a lot more information or even get someone on the phone to do that. And so I think that maybe drives some of that gap.
I do love there, though, that no matter how much technology we have and no matter how seamless it is, we still have to discuss with our wife when we get home.
That's right. That's right.
Now, many brands don't include local stores in their omnichannel marketing strategies, and that results in missed opportunities to help buyers complete their path to purchase locally. I mean, why are so many neglecting brick and mortar, do you think? And is that a real big mistake in your eyes?
Well, of course, I think it's a mistake, and a big one. And I think it's pretty straightforward as to why it might be. If you think about what's happened in the last decade, digital has just sort of enveloped everything. And so if you have been in the retail arena for a long time, things did not change for sort of decades in the same way that they've changed in just a few short years all of a sudden. And so your imperative was go figure out your digital strategy. What is going on that I need to address in digital? Because, we used to do Sunday circular advertising, local newspaper for our stores, yellow page style directory advertising, and that just plain worked. Maybe layer in a little bit of direct mail on top of that for decades. Mm-hmm. But now I've got to address all this digital stuff. So they, set about to go addressing all of the digital stuff. And well, meanwhile, the store network is just sort of hanging off to the side, right? And a lot of times, these retailers and brands and enterprises might not even realize that the big investments they've made in digital, which are correct and good, are actually influencing their in-store sales in a different way. And so, attribution has become a much more nuanced thing to understand because of all of that cross-channel dynamic that exists. And so now you're starting to see them come back a little bit to say, oh, okay, we've now figured out how to do a whole bunch of things in digital for the brand, but my end consumer, potential buyer, they're going to interact with me online. They're hopefully going to be in my store, or a retail store buying some of my product. They want to start to see some of the same things. Mm-hmm. So if there's a special offer that they've been exposed to online, well, boy, when they show up at a retail store that carries my product, they sure as heck want to see some evidence that that offer exists, right? So that it's a seamless experience no matter what channel they choose to interact with, for my brand. And I think that's a harder problem to solve than sort of go figure out some digital stuff. And so I think that now come back around and go, all right, my store network, the marketing related to that now has to conform to or harmonize with all the things we're doing in digital so that the consumer at the end of the line that we're actually trying to reach enjoys a level of consistency every time they interact with my brand, no matter how they choose to do it.
But can you share any insights about how digital influences physical? And also our internet dominates the critical first engagements that influence what and where people actually buy.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, it's fascinating. Here's a quick example. I'll use round numbers. Probably about 10 years ago, if you think about, for example, an automobile purchase, the typical new car buyer would spend, 2, 3, 4 hours doing some version of digital research and consideration, and would then go visit 4 or 5 different auto dealers before making a decision of buying a car, right? 5 years ago, all of a sudden that was 10, 12 hours of online research and consideration, and I'm visiting 2 or 3 dealers before buying a car. Today, as I'm sure you can imagine, now you're talking couple dozen hours. For some people, that's a minimum, but a couple dozen hours of research and consideration that may happen over a period of weeks or even months. And the average number of dealerships visited by that new car buyer is less than 2.
Wow. So
basically, most of the buying decision is happening before the consumer ends up in the store, right? So if you're not having influence ahead of that, then they never come to your store. You don't even know you missed them, basically, because they no longer shop around store to store to store. They sort of decide in advance, gee, I am going to show up at Neil's Toyota because I've done my research and I know I've now figured out where you are through online. I've figured out what you carry. I've looked at your inventory, your messaging, your orientation around that you've been in the community for 25 years, you're service oriented, et cetera. You're going to take great care of me. And boom, I'm going to show up there. And so there may be fewer numbers of people showing up there, but they're much more qualified and ready to buy than they ever were before.
Retailers must undoubtedly change their ways to thrive and survive in a digital world. But what changes do you think consumers will actually see? And how will it change their expectation levels, which will ultimately affect the fate of retailers as well, won't it?
Well, I think one is, attention span.
Yeah.
And when you think about the stratification of, different age groups or generations, the attention span, I think, is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. as the years go by. And so you've got to get your messaging out more crisply, faster, probably in more places over time. You've got mobile devices, which again, from a footprint perspective, don't give you a whole lot to work with in order to get your message out and get and keep that attention. And so, consumers are, they're just changing rapidly, and businesses have to find ways to make sure that they can address things in a much more concise way, be available and discoverable where all of those consumers are going to want to go. So some people, they just like looking at for recommendations and business listings inside of Facebook. Yeah. That's what they like to do. That's where they like to discover a store or a service provider in their local community. However, other people like online directories. Other people just simply use, a Bing or Google search to find a store. And we all have our own preference as to which one of those we might want to begin the journey in. And you really have to have some level of presence in all of the key ones to find those what are, we refer to as micro moments that are fleeting. Yeah. And if you're not there for it, boom, you just missed the sale opportunity that you never knew you had.
Absolutely. So what's next for Netsertive? Is there anything else you can share with us today?
Yeah, well, I think what's next for us right now is, we are really heads down on continuing to execute what has long been our mission in the world, which is to harmonize this distributed local marketing capability, do that for brands, publishers, and local. And we're really focused on sort of fully integrating the Mixpo capabilities, which we just brought together with Netsertive here a couple of months ago. So that's our near term, is to finish off that integration and then bring that entire set of capabilities to bear on the market more seamlessly, which we're seeing huge demand for, especially among enterprise brands who want to understand how to scale and deploy video and rich media capabilities, which is, again, fastest growing channels out there. So we're really excited about that and continuing to grow and be part of, building this part of the industry, which we might refer to as brand to local marketing tech.
Fantastic. Well, before I let you go, can you remind the listeners of your website details, contact details, just so listeners can contact a member of your team if they need any more information?
Of course. Well, thank you for that. Yep. So you can always find us, of course, at netsertive.com. That's NETSERTIVE, netsertive.com, where you can find all of our contact details, and a quick forum fill or chat would get you on the line with somebody to hear a little bit more about your business and what you're trying to solve.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's amazing what you're doing. It's a real eye-opener on how the retail industry is changing and how they're going to have to change and evolve with the times, because there's so many young retailers, like you say, are opening up now. And it's just a fantastic thing. So a big thank you for coming on today and sharing your story.
Great. Thank you, Neil. Appreciate it.
I'm relieved to hear that companies such as Netsertive are addressing this mobile gap, because consumers are now browsing more on smartphones and generating over half of all web traffic. But when it comes to clicking the buy button, they still revert to the desktop browser. And neglecting brick and mortar is a bad move too, because many brands don't include local stores in their omnichannel marketing strategies, and this results in missed opportunities to help buyers complete their path and purchase locally. We need to remember that digital influences physical stores, and 90% of retail sales are transacted in a store. But the internet now dominates the critical first engagement that influences what and where people buy. But if you work in retail, I'd love to hear your views and your insights on this one. So let me know, as always, by giving me a shout out on Twitter at Neil C. Hughes, or by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. So a big thank you to Brendan Morrissey from Netsertive for sharing his insights today, and an even bigger thank you for you crazy cats for tuning into this show each day. But I'm going to walk off to my shop now and pick up some supplies and snacks. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.